Charles Bronson made a choice in 1971 that would follow him until his death. He declined a position that would have made all the difference. Additionally, his daughter subsequently acknowledged that he never forgiven himself. It wasn't the only secret, though. Bronson carried trauma from the war and the coal mines, had PTSD long before anyone knew what it was, and had a tender side that the public never saw. Lawsuits erupted after he died. His relatives finally came out after learning that his estate was worth millions more than previously stated. The monster that America thought Charles Bronson was not the actual Charles Bronson. On November 3, 1921, Charles Bronson was born into a household that was so packed that it was no longer fit to be called a home. In Ahrenfeld, Pennsylvania, there were 17 individuals living in a cold water shack, 2 parents and 15 kids. It had no power, running water, or even indoor plumbing. Right close to the coal tracks, where frigid dust covered everything inside and out, and freight cars thundered by all the time, they lived. The children slept in shifts since there weren't enough beds. It's not only where you grew up, you made it through. Charles had to wear his sister's hand-me-down clothing to school because of the extreme poverty. There was nothing he could do. He simply had to stand there and take it as the boys in the class made fun of him and his attire. Nor were the socks his own. He removed them when he got home from school and gave them to his brothers, who then wore them while working in the coal mines. To keep lice away, his father, Walter, shaved all the children bald, but it was a harsh practice. Barefoot and dressed like a prisoner, Charles had little protection from the jeering. For the rest of his life, he recalled that sensation. He began smoking at the age of 9, not to look cool. He did it as a coping mechanism. After many days underground, his father came home intoxicated and angry, so he took smokes from him. The children dispersed, hiding in corners to avoid him, as soon as their mother announced, "He's coming." Charles was unsure of whether he feared or despised his father more. It wasn't affection. It wasn't secure. There was terror and quiet. Smoking evolved into a means of inhaling something other than tension or cold dust. Walter passed away from cancer in 1931, when Charles was just 10 years old. There was nothing left for the family. Just pressure, no funds, no direction. Almost immediately, Charles was put to work in the mines. After working in the office for a while, he and the others were underground, going through pitch-black tunnels, while wearing a lamp affixed to his head. Each ton of coal brought in $1 for him. He earned $1 after a week. In today's currency, that is roughly $24, and he required it merely to assist the family in eating. His jobs weren't easy. He offered his services to the most deadly ones, such as the removal of stumps. To remove debris, that required squeezing through narrow spaces between mine shafts. The entire tunnel could collapse with a single mistake. He witnessed it. When he was 5 years old in 1927, an explosion confined 300 miners, including his father, and killed 4 of them. He had never tasted death before. He was living in constant fear by the age of 16, breathing the same black dust that had already killed his father, and working for pennies to support his large family. Charles struggled with his English at school. At home, his family spoke only Russian and Lithuanian. He felt even more alone as a result. Even years later in the service, his thick accent made him seem alien. Throughout his life, he was ridiculed, misinterpreted, and thought to be an outsider. He was out of place at both the mines and the school. He had no place. Charles took on extra tasks because the mine didn't pay well. He went to the bakery with his brother. Customers laughed when he burped loudly in front of them one day. He realized for the first time that he could draw attention. He remembered that moment. It was the beginning of something new and escape. He continued to extract coal during the day. He drew distant locations, scribbled dreams on pieces of paper, and dreamed of a world beyond used socks and dark caves. However, the exchanging of socks continued. He got home, pulled off his one pair of socks, and gave them to someone else who needed them for the night shift, even if he was working double hours. Charles was 20 years old and eager to escape by 1941. He moved to Atlantic City after leaving Ehrenfeld. He turned into a carnival barker, a bellhop, and a man who could deal with inebriated tourists and unruly crowds. His body grew stronger, his thinking sharper, and his voice louder. Those occupations were training for the screen, though he wasn't aware of it yet. He almost went to jail for a bar fight over unpaid tips. He never truly got over the anger that resulted from years of humiliation. He was recruited into the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1943, 2 years later. After training to become a tail gunner on a B-29 Superfortress bomber, He began his career as a truck driver. In 1945, he completed 25 flights over Japan. His arms were ripped apart by shrapnel during one of them. Flying at great altitudes and freezing, knowing that enemy fire could end it all in seconds, earned him the Purple Heart. That was his world. He witnessed pals passing away in midair. They lost more than 400 B-29s. It altered him, yet he lived. The dreams persisted. However, he once remarked, "I never had it so good as when I entered the army. The fighting felt like a respite after the mines." Charles was lost once more after the war ended in 1946. Before he met a bunch of actors on vacation from Philadelphia, he returned to odd jobs in Atlantic City. He first heard the word theater at that point. He studied acting in Philadelphia, using his GI Bill advantages. Although others found him humorous due to his heavy accent, his presence was unavoidable. He joined the Pasadena Playhouse after relocating to California in 1949. People recognized him, even though he didn't suit Hollywood's neat aesthetic. Then he got his first break in movies. He was referred to director Henry Hathaway in 1951 by a teacher. "You're in the Navy now" was the title of the film. Although it was a minor role, it was sufficient. In fact, his ability to burp on command, a peculiar talent, helped him get the role. Although he hardly spoke, his eyes spoke for him. He lacked polish. He was genuine. Hollywood was still unsure of how to handle him. He was informed by one casting agent that he was too unattractive to be a star. His face was rugged, ravaged by combat and mines. He was known to the Italians as Il Bruto, or the Ugly One. He was referred to as L'Monstre Sacré, the Sacred Monster, by the French. He appeared to be a Clark Gable left out in the sun, according to critics. Charles accepted his imperfections rather than trying to hide them. He strengthened his body, boxed, exercised, and maintained that tough exterior. His fame was not due to his looks. It was the truth. Playing a thug in the gang for just $50 a day in 1951 gave Charles Bronson his first taste of Hollywood. He wasn't even Bronson at the time. He was Charles Buckinski, who lived with Jack Klugman in a little one-room apartment in Hollywood. He was barely surviving with his wife, Harriet. While he was studying acting at Pasadena Playhouse, she was employed at a department store. He accepted whatever was offered to him, whether it was little uncredited roles, theatrical set painting, or summertime assistants at amusement parks. He only had a reputation for being on time and organized. He had no agency or studio deal. He was remembered by directors. Even though his name wasn't seen on screen, that led to his recasting. When he portrayed the massive, silent Igor in House of Wax, in 1953 he got his big break. He delivered a terrifying performance without uttering a word, and is still recognized as Buckinski. However, things were tight. In Hollywood, McCarthyism was rampant, and names like Buckinski raised red flags. His agency pushed him to alter it in 1954. Bronson, taken directly from a street sign in Hollywood, was his choice. It was an act of survival. He never turned back after filming Vera Cruz as Buckinski. He portrayed Pittsburgh, one of the mercenaries searching for gold, in Vera Cruz. Behind the scenes, however, things became ugly. A producer attempted to defraud him of his salary. Bronson remained silent. He put the man in a corner and got aggressive. It might have been the end of it all. Rather, it exposed the fire he had carried with him since his Pennsylvania mining days. His portrayal was noted by critics as being icy, compelling, and memorable. In 1955, Big House USA increased that intensity. Bronson infused memories from the coal mines into his portrayal of escaped convict Benny Kelly to create a character that felt genuine and dangerous. He deviated from the script during a brawl in the prison yard. A stuntman was admitted to the hospital. Bronson remained unflinching. Everything about him felt genuine, including his appearance, physique, and demeanor. Critics paid attention. He portrayed Blue Buffalo, a Sioux chief, in the 1957 film Run of the Arrow. The casting was problematic. Like many others at the time, he was in brownface. However, Bronson contributed surprising talent to the position. He did not falsify his archery. It originated from his time serving as a tail gunner during World War II. He got into a fight with Rod Steiger while still on site. Steiger tended to act methodically. Bronson didn't. Their arguments about style and script revealed Bronson's increasing craving for command. He would follow that feeling. In 1958, he took his first actual shot in Machine Gun Kelly, directed by Roger Corman. It was inexpensively and quickly made, $60,000, 8 days. Although Bronson wasn't the initial lead, He took over when Dick Miller resigned. It was a scary and vicious role. He portrayed Kelly as a paranoid man afraid of dying rather than a hero. Finally, he wasn't merely a supporting character, and the film was a huge smash for its size. He led his debut Western lead, Showdown at Boot Hill, that same year. He kept it low-key, letting stares and quiet do the talking, like a conscience-driven bounty hunter. It was a change. Bronson was no longer merely tough. He had layers. He was collaborating with Frank Sinatra on Never So Few by 1959. In a story concerning OSS missions, Bronson stood with Sinatra, Steve McQueen, and others as a sergeant in Burma. Although he wasn't the main attraction, he was noticeable. His name was starting to count. The Magnificent Seven followed in 1960. He received a hefty boost of $50,000. He portrayed the quiet revolutionary, Bernardo O'Reilly. A jumble of egos made up the set. Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen were always at odds. McQueen attempted to steal scenes. Brynner employed a person to keep track of his moves. Bronson didn't get involved. He was referred to as a loner by Eli Wallach, yet his role endured, particularly abroad. The movie was a hit in Europe, and Bronson gained notoriety. He collaborated with Vincent Price once more in 1961's Master of the World, this time playing a government agent pursuing a villain in a flying spacecraft. Bronson, however, detested the script. He preferred to play it like a child rather than a Victorian aristocrat. It was a stressful set. Price attempted to contact him but was unsuccessful. Bronson remained vigilant. He felt out of place, according to the team, and the film didn't land properly. When Charles Bronson portrayed Danny Valinsky in The Great Escape, he was doing more than just acting. He had really worked in coal mines in Pennsylvania, so he understood how to dig. He insisted on excavating actual tunnels himself while filming in Munich, spending hours below. He was interested in whether it looked well on camera, how the wooden beams supported the ceiling, and how the dirt felt. Because of his Polish accent, which conflicted with the director's vision, reshoots were necessary, costing United Artists an additional $100,000 in 1963, approximately $950,000 today. Nor was the claustrophobia on his face a facade. He leaned into it, and he truly had it. In order to get the tunnel sequences perfect, Bronson worked 12-hour hours for 6 weeks. Because he thought the character should die with purpose, he even invented the death scene for Valinsky. Bronson went from being a supporting actor to a main man in that movie, which made $11.7 million. Bronson portrayed Joseph Władysław, a soldier on execution row, in the film The Dirty Dozen. Additionally, the location of the chateau attack when he mowed down Nazi officials is still remembered. Because of how severe the violence was, MGM thought about awarding it a R classification, which was uncommon in 1967. Bronson and co-star Lee Marvin got into a bar brawl on the London set after Marvin allegedly stole a phrase Bronson had written about Polish resistance heroes. Production was halted for 3 days after Marvin left with a fractured nose, incurring additional expenses of $75,000. Bronson was also familiar with weaponry. He served as a B-29 gunner during World War II, and the director was so pleased by his on-screen handling of guns that they extended his screen time by 8 minutes. The film generated $45.3 million worldwide, compared to its original budget of $5.3 million. At the time, Bronson's largest salary was $150,000. Suddenly, calls came in from European directors. Sergio Leone was one such director. When he wrote Harmonica for Once Upon a Time in the West, he was thinking about Bronson. Bronson was no longer inexpensive. He declined their offer of $100,000. He requested and received $500,000, 5 times his previous amount. He was paid more than Henry Fonda for the role, making him the highest-paid actor in the movie. To make the persona more enigmatic, Bronson changed the majority of his own lines and eliminated 60% of the speech. In order to perform live on stage, he even relearned how to play the harmonica. That scene of revelation. To get it right, it took 23 tries. Under sweltering heat that occasionally reached 115 zub. Filming took place for 18 weeks in Rome's Cynic Studios and Monument Valley. Bronson was also the one who thought up the whistling motif. The film was a box office failure in America, but it generated $14 million in Europe and introduced Bronson to a whole new audience. From then on, his silent, lethal manner began to influence the appearance of action heroes in the 1970s. Then followed the San Sebastian Guns, which were fired in the Sonoran Desert in Mexico. Bronson frequently had Anthony Quinn by his side as he rode horses in temperatures over 120. The set was dangerous in addition to being attractive. Equipment continued to malfunction. The crew was endangered by bandits. Additionally, Bronson was stung by a scorpion during a fight scene in a saloon. Despite the swelling in his hand, he continued to record. Despite the doctor's orders to go to the hospital, he covered it with cloth and continued. Since every day that was lost would have cost MGM $50,000, they could not afford any delays. Bronson persevered, and because the medications were wearing off, they were able to capture his character's death, which was shot while rescuing villagers in a single take. Although the film only brought in $4.2 million, the local crew nicknamed Bronson Eldro for his daring performance. He got known for his toughness. Bronson portrayed Rogelio Fierro, a real-life revolutionary, in Villa Rides. Yul Brynner's opposite. He brought to the position all of his gunnery skills from the conflict. In one scenario, he lines up 15 captives, and, despite the fact that they used blanks, he pretends to execute them, much like the real Fierro once did. It felt too real, and the extras actually winced. Bronson made sure the scene mirrored the darkness he had read about Fierro's once-in-a-day killing of 300 victims. It took 2 days and 8 takes. He insisted on period guns, accurate ammo belts, and even firing positions that corresponded with historical documentation. This time he was paid $200,000. On a budget of $6.8 million, the film earned $12.4 million. A few executives in Hollywood were becoming anxious. They questioned whether audiences would begin to perceive Bronson as more aggressive than heroic as his performances become more passionate. Bronson at last rose to fame in France, with Rider on the Reign. The film won a Golden Globe for Best Foreign Film, and made $6 million in France alone. He exploited his fluency in Russian and Lithuanian, which he had learned while growing up in the mines, to play a mystery American colonel. He even refused to do a nude scene until the director offered him an additional $50,000 on top of his base pay of $200,000. The movie was so popular in Europe that it surpassed major American productions in France, Italy, and Germany. However, it failed when it was eventually released in the United States 3 years later. After that, Bronson portrayed a hitman who had been betrayed by the mafia in Violent City. This became risky. According to legends, the real mafia didn't appreciate how they were portrayed in the film, which was filmed in Italy and New Orleans. After being threatened, Bronson was allegedly seen on set with a real .38 handgun. The automobile pursuit scenes raised safety issues, according to Italian authorities. 18 minutes, 47 cars, and $380,000 in damage. Private security had to be strengthened by production. For $150,000, Ennio Morricone composed the music. Out of the Past served as inspiration for the plot's excessive reliance on flashbacks. The film hardly made an impression in the United States, in spite of all of that. However, Bronson's reputation in Europe continued to grow. Then came Red Sun, in which Bronson co-starred with Alain Dion of France and Toshiro Moon of Japan. The director had to manage English, Japanese, French, German, and Spanish on site, while the actors spoke 5 different languages. Bronson used WTWOUI knife combat methods in one sword fight, but a fake katana blade cracked and severely injured his hand. Despite needing 12 stitches, he continued to film while wearing a bandage on his hand. Even the unexpected snowfall in Madrid forced them to stop production due to weather delays. Despite earning $12 million, it received very little attention in America, coming in at number 53 at the box office. Chato's territory made matters worse. The violence in Bronson's portrayal of an Apache character was so graphic that the use of actual animal blood was protested by animal rights activists, who would later become PETA. Michael Y., the director, wanted everything to seem authentic. Even though the budget was only $1.8 million, $180,000 was spent on cosmetics. One of the bloodiest westerns of its era, it included 23 on-screen deaths. A number of European nations redacted portions of it. In the movie, Bronson didn't say much. The 6 films he would go on to make with Winner would be characterized by this harshness and stillness, which amounted to less than 400 words in total. Bronson portrayed Joe Valachi in the Velas Papers, who testified before the U.S. Senate in 1963 and revealed the existence of the mafia. Bronson met with 3 ex-mobsters in New York to get ready. Velos's former colleagues were paid $25,000 by producer Dino De Laurentiis, for information. A picture of Bronson with tattoos and actual ex-cons serving as extras surfaced during the Rome shoot. There were false rumors that Bronson had a criminal history. The situation became so critical that FBI investigators arrived to verify the truth of the film. Due to concerns that it would make him appear too tough, some American theaters declined to screen it. However, the film earned $18.7 million, making it one of the highest-grossing films of the year. He was popular outside of Europe for the first time, and he had at last made it in America. With just one movie in 1974, Charles Bronson transformed from a well-known figure into a worldwide action star. Death Wish astonished the nation, with its brutal depiction of violence, in addition to its vigilante plot. Bronson's character suffers the most severe loss of his wife and daughter in a home invasion. Despite only costing $3 million, the movie made $22 million, and Bronson made $1 million. The critics were incensed. With a review that sounded like a warning, the New York Times blasted it. "Take a life. Give it a try. You'll enjoy it." Some referred to it as vile. However, the fury was like gasoline for a rocket. People came in droves to witness it, drawn in by controversy and an increasing concern over the rise in urban violence. Bronson flew back to Vermont every weekend while filming because he didn't want to involve his family in the mayhem in New York. What started as a film became a phenomenon and a topic of national discussion. Bronson portrayed Vince Majestic, a melon grower, in the same year. Although it appeared to be a modest job on paper, it was reminiscent of Bronson's own working-class upbringing in Pennsylvania's coal mines. When a Colorado farmer realized the film company had a lot of money, he sought $10,000 instead of the agreed-upon $3,500 to utilize his land, which caused problems for the film. That was not the end of it. Later, Bronson sued the studio for failing to pay him an additional $1 million. In 1976, he won. Critics noted that the movie lost an opportunity to make a significant statement against migrant workers. Instead, as one put it, the typical Charles Bronson heroics quickly clobber social importance. Bronson took on the role of a silent, bare-knuckled fighter amid the Great Depression in the 1975 film Hard Times. He was all muscle at the age of 55, performing his own stunts and even unintentionally knocking out other actors during actual hits. It was evident that he understood boxing as more than just a skill. It was a part of his history. Something unvarnished and genuine was caught in the New Orleans shot movie. Beneath the steel, his character would display a calm tenderness by helping drug users or feeding stray kittens in between vicious fists. The last battle, which took place in a deserted warehouse with no spectators, became a legend in and of itself. The following year, while filming Breakheart Pass in Idaho, Bronson ended up aboard a moving train. Genuine risk, genuine snow. As the train slid down the tracks at about 12 mph, he and a real boxer named Archie Moore battled on top of freezing box carriages. The team suffered from hypothermia, but Bronson persevered, claiming it brought back memories of the cold on his World War II flights. They staged a derailment at one point. He completed it on his own. No double stunt. It turned into one of the riskiest train sequences ever captured on camera. The Cold War was well underway by 1979, and telephones skillfully capitalized on the anxiety. Everyone, including Donald Sutherland, was impressed by Bronson's portrayal of a KGB operative, as he had grown up speaking Russian. However, there was tension behind the scenes. His dialogue was constantly altered by rewrites, particularly the Russian lines he had rehearsed ceaselessly. He eventually barged off the set, causing the studio to halt work. At last, they consented to cease altering his writing. The $10 million film made extensive use of psychological warfare and spy technology. Bronson's life was just as intense off-screen. In 1963, when Jill Ireland was still married to David McCallum, he met her on the set of The Great Escape. They were married 5 years later. They reared 2 girls, one biological and one adopted, while she was 15 years younger. Before she received a breast cancer diagnosis in 1984, their love seemed invincible. After undergoing a mastectomy, she went on to advocate for cancer awareness in public, and even received an award from Ronald Reagan. However, the illness reappeared. At the age of 54, she passed away in their Malibu home in 1990. Bronson was never able to move on. He continued to write her love letters for years after she died, according to his daughter. The story of his previous marriage was rather different. He married Harriet Tendler, a wealthy farmer's daughter. in 1949 while he was a destitute actor in Philadelphia. While he pursued roles, she helped them both. Tony and Suzanne are their 2 children. However, his marriage was in disarray by the time Hollywood took notice of him in the 1960s. Later on, she accused him of having several affairs while working on The Magnificent Seven. Their 1965 divorce was acrimonious. Tendler also said that Bronson traded allegiance for notoriety, even though he was granted custody of the children. The number of Death Wish sequels started to rise as the 1980s approached. The violence intensified. Critics flinched. Death Wish received no stars from Roger Ebert for this coup, but the crowd continued to grow. 3 Death Wish brought bazookas. Death Wish 4 combined drug politics from the Reagan era with vigilante punishment. The stunts also become riskier. In 1982, while filming, Bronson's face was injured by a misfired blank cartridge. But he continued. The sequels brought in over $100 million over the following 10 years. At the age of 77, Bronson remarried in 1998, this time to 1960-born actress Kim Weeks. However, he received an Alzheimer's diagnosis shortly after. His thoughts dwindled. He developed paranoia. Confused and terrified, he even filed a lawsuit against Kim for elder abuse in 2002. She remained with him even though the lawsuit was resolved. Eventually, lung cancer brought on by decades of smoking took control. He passed away in Los Angeles in 2003, at the age of 81. Something strange happened a year before he passed away. Audrey Jean Knauer, a chemist from Kentucky, revised her will by writing down a list of emergency phone numbers. She had never met Charles Bronson, but he inherited her whole $300,000 estate. She had ripped up newspaper clippings, rented his movies compulsively, and looked up to him. Only $20,000 was what her family had anticipated. In private, Bronson gave up all of his earnings to a worthy cause. His daughters started to speak up after his passing. According to Zuleika, Bronson had a drawer full of toys that were exclusively for her. Marbles, crayons, and small books. Every morning he would sneak into her room to watch her smile. After Jill Ireland passed away, Katrina recalled how he reared her as if she were his own. They spoke about a quiet, gentle man who loved. Even love letters written decades after her mother's death were discovered by Zuleika. Instead of the $1, his estate was valued at $45 million. There was a $5 million figure floating around. Kim received $1.6 million in cash and an $8 million house. 2 other properties totaling $10 million were inherited by his children. However, lawsuits from family members, studios, and ex-wives quickly followed. His estate was still battling for millions in unpaid film royalties years later. One of Bronson's greatest regrets may have been declining the Dirty Harry job in 1971. He was concerned about how the violence in the script would affect his kids, so he didn't like it. Clint Eastwood seized the opportunity. Although Bronson made less money, his fame from Death Wish was never quite as great as Dirty Harry's. He lived the rest of his life regretting it, according to his daughter. But it wasn't simply the steel behind his gaze. Bronson had survived hell. He was born in 1921 and lived in such poverty that he had to wear dresses to school, since there were no more boy clothing. As a child, he made $1 per ton working in coal mines. He received a Purple Heart for flying a B-29 bomber on 25 sorties over Japan during World War II. Although his body was strong, his mind was scarred in ways that no one could see. According to his kids, he suffered from PTSD long before the phrase was coined. That's what made his performances so angry. For this reason, he was admired by other action actors like Willis, Stallone, and Schwarzenegger. His legacy will continue to evolve even after his passing. Bruce Willis starred in the 2018 Hollywood remake of Death Wish. Critics weren't impressed, despite the $49 million it made. According to his family, the real Bronson was not at all like the blood-stained persona he grew to be renowned for. He was shy, they remarked. He did some painting. He and his grandchildren laughed. He liked galleries better than guns, his daughter discovered. His Vermont tomb is now a popular destination for pilgrims. His family, however, serves as a reminder to anyone who visits that beneath every tense jaw and leisurely gait was a guy who merely wished to keep those he loved safe.